The distant thunder of hoofbeats echoed through Maggie Vale's soul like the ghosts that had chased her across 3 states. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, scanning Telluride's dusty main street with eyes that had seen too much for a woman of 24. Colorado Territory, 1876, far enough from her past, she prayed, but the sinking feeling in her stomach told her differently. No matter how many miles she put between herself and Louisiana, some stains couldn't be outrun. The stagecoach that had delivered her to this mining boomtown rattled away, leaving her alone with her single trunk and the weight of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the hastily constructed buildings that lined the street, a testament to the silver boom that had transformed Telluride from a handful of tents to a proper town in just a few short years. "Need some help with that trunk, miss?" Maggie startled at the deep voice behind her. She turned to find herself looking up quite a way up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with broad shoulders and a weathered face that suggested years under the open sky. His dark blonde hair curled from beneath a well-worn Stetson, and despite the trail dust coating his clothes, there was something undeniably striking about him. "I can manage," she replied automatically, her guard rising as it always did around strangers. The man's expression shifted to amusement. "I don't doubt your capabilities, madam, but that trunk looks mighty heavy, and the Wyoming Hotel is a good 4 blocks from here." Her eyes narrowed. "How did you know I was heading to the Wyoming? Only decent place in town for a lady traveling alone," he said with a shrug. "Unless you're here to work at one of the saloons," which he glanced at her modest traveling dress and the simple gold cross at her throat. "Doesn't seem likely." Maggie hesitated. Her trunk did contain everything she owned in the world, and it was indeed heavy. "Very well, Mr. Grayson." "Tyler Grayson." He touched the brim of his hat. "My friends call me Ty. I'm Maggie Vale." She offered nothing more, no explanation of why she'd arrived in Telluride or how long she planned to stay. Tyler Grayson hefted her trunk onto his shoulder with an ease that spoke of physical strength earned through hard work rather than leisure. "New schoolteacher?" he asked as they began walking. "Is that what the town is expecting?" "Town's expecting somebody. Mayor's been crowing about finding a proper teacher for weeks now. The mining booms brought families, and families mean children needing schooling." Maggie nodded, relieved. "Then yes, I'm the new teacher. The school board in Denver arranged it." They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of the bustling town surrounding them, the clang from the blacksmith shop, piano music drifting from a saloon, the shouts of men unloading supplies at the general store. "What brings a cowboy into town?" she asked, noticing the worn chaps and spurs that marked his profession. "I run the Silver Creek Ranch about 10 miles south of here, in town for supplies and to meet with the assayer about some land I'm considering." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "And it's not cowboy, it's rancher. I own the place." "I apologize for the mistake," Maggie said, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. "No offense taken, though I still work alongside my men most days. Can't expect respect if you won't do what you ask others to do." They reached the Wyoming Hotel, a 3-story structure that, while not ornate, stood as one of the more substantial buildings in Telluride. Tyler set down her trunk at the front desk while Maggie arranged for her room. "School term starts in 2 weeks, Tyler remarked as he carried her trunk up to her second-floor room. "That gives you time to get settled before facing 20 or so wild mountain children." "I've taught in challenging circumstances before," Maggie said. Thinking back to the plantation schoolhouse where she'd first discovered her calling, Tyler set her trunk at the foot of the bed and stepped back, his tall frame filling the doorway. "I'm sure you'll do fine, Miss Vale. Telluride needs good people willing to put down roots." Something in his expression, earnest, open, made her chest tighten. "Mr. Grayson, I should warn you that I'm not." She stopped herself, old habits of caution resurfacing. "I'm not certain how long I'll stay. I tend not to remain in one place too long." He studied her for a moment, those blue eyes seeming to see more than she wanted to reveal. "Well, Miss Vale, perhaps Telluride will change your mind." He touched the brim of his hat again. "I'll be in town until tomorrow." "Would you allow me to show you around a bit? Help you get your bearings?" Maggie knew she should refuse. Getting close to people only made it harder when it came time to leave, and she always left eventually. But something about Tyler Grayson's straightforward manner drew her in. "That would be kind of you, Mr. Grayson. Thank you." "Ty," he corrected. "If we're to be neighbors of sorts, might as well use my given name." "Ty," she repeated, testing the sound. "Then you must call me Maggie." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "I'll call for you tomorrow at 10 if that suits." After he left, Maggie sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. Telluride was supposed to be a fresh start, a place remote enough that her past couldn't find her. But fresh starts required honesty, and honesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. The morning dawned clear and cool, typical for early September in the San Juan Mountains. Maggie dressed carefully in a cornflower blue dress that brought out the gray in her eyes, arranging her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. She had learned long ago that appearing respectable was half the battle in establishing oneself in a new town. True to his word, Tyler Grayson arrived at the hotel precisely at 10. He'd exchanged his trail-worn clothes for clean denims and a pressed shirt, though he still wore the same well-broken-in boots and Stetson. "You clean up well, Mr. Grayson," Maggie observed as she descended the hotel stairs. "As do you, Miss Vale, though I reckon you never look anything but proper." His eyes held appreciation but nothing improper, "and I thought we agreed on Ty." "Ty," she corrected herself with a small smile, "old habits." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his sleeve. "I thought we'd start with the schoolhouse, since that's your primary concern, then perhaps the mercantile and other establishments you'll need to know." The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple but sturdy wooden structure with large windows to admit light. Inside, rows of benches faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform. A large slate board covered much of the wall behind the desk, and a pot-bellied stove stood in the corner. "It's not fancy," Ty said, watching her reaction, "but the town took pride in building it. Before this, classes were held in the back room of the church when the weather was bad." Maggie ran her hand along the smooth surface of the teacher's desk. "It's wonderful, more than adequate." She turned slowly, envisioning the room filled with students. "How many children should I expect?" 23 at last count, ranging from 6 to 16. Miners' kids mostly, some ranchers' children who board in town during the school term. He leaned against the doorframe. "My foreman's 2 boys will be among them. Good kids, but spirited." "All children are spirited if you give them the right encouragement," Maggie said, smiling genuinely for perhaps the first time since her arrival. Something flickered in Ty's eyes, approval, perhaps. "You sound like you truly care about teaching." "It's not just a job to me," she admitted. "Education changes lives, opens doors that would otherwise remain closed." They continued their tour of Telluride, Ty introducing her to shopkeepers and townspeople they encountered. Maggie was struck by the respect shown to him, not deference born of fear, but the genuine respect earned through fair dealings and reliability. At the mercantile, the owner, Mr. Jenkins, greeted Ty warmly. "Mr. Grayson, your order came in yesterday, and who might this lovely lady be?" "This is Miss Maggie Vale, our new schoolteacher," Ty explained. "Maggie, Ralph Jenkins runs the finest mercantile between Denver and Salt Lake City, if you believe his advertisements." Mr. Jenkins laughed good-naturedly. "Don't let this rancher fool you, Miss Vale. He's one of my best customers, especially when it comes to books. Got a whole room of them out at his ranch, I hear." Maggie glanced at Ty in surprise. "You're a reader," a hint of color touched his tan cheeks. "A man's got to do something during the long winter nights." "Mr. Grayson's being modest," Jenkins continued. "Man's got more books than our town library. Philosophy, history, literature, you name it." Ty cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "My order, Ralph." As Jenkins went to retrieve the package, Maggie studied Ty with new interest. "A cowboy, pardon me, a rancher who reads philosophy. You're full of surprises, Mr. Grayson." Most people are more than they appear at first glance, he replied, his gaze steady on hers. Wouldn't you agree, Miss Vale? The question hit too close to home, and Maggie looked away. Perhaps. They continued their tour, stopping for lunch at a small cafe where Ty recommended the beef stew. Throughout the meal, he told her about Telluride, its recent history as a mining boomtown, the characters who populated it, the challenges of mountain life. Winter comes early and stays late up here, he warned. By November, we could have several feet of snow. The pass to Montrose sometimes closes until spring thaw. Are you trying to frighten me away, Mr. Grayson? He shook his head. Just being honest about the realities of life here. It's not easy, but there's something about these mountains that gets in your blood. His gaze drifted to the window where the rugged peaks rose against the blue sky. I came here intending to stay a month. That was 7 years ago. What brought you here originally? Maggie asked, curious about this enigmatic man. A shadow crossed his face, a need for distance and a fresh start. He turned back to her, expression clearing. Not so different from most who end up in places like this, I imagine. Maggie felt a kinship with him, then a shared understanding of what it meant to seek new beginnings. But while his past, whatever it contained, seemed to have released him, hers still had its claws firmly embedded. After lunch, they visited the church, the newspaper office, and finally circled back to the hotel as afternoon shadows lengthened across the street. Thank you for today, Maggie said sincerely. You've made me feel welcome in a way I haven't experienced in quite some time. Telluride's a good town with good people, despite what you might hear in the saloons after midnight. Ty hesitated. I'd be honored if you join me for dinner tomorrow evening before I head back to the ranch. There's a decent restaurant at the Columbia Hotel. Maggie knew she should refuse. Getting attached to anyone, especially someone as perceptive as Tyler Grayson, was dangerous. But the thought of another solitary evening in her hotel room held little appeal. I would like that, she said, surprising herself. His smile was worth the risk. I'll call for you at 6 then. That night, Maggie unpacked her trunk, arranging her modest belongings in the hotel room that would be her home until she found more permanent lodgings. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in a shawl, lay a small pistol, a lady's derringer, and a stack of newspaper clippings. She lifted the weapon, checking that it was still loaded before replacing it in its hiding place. The newspaper clippings she spread on the bed, though she knew every word by heart. Prominent Louisiana plantation owner murdered, search continues for missing governess, reward offered for information. She gathered them up, hands trembling slightly, and returned them to their hiding place. 2 years had passed. 2 years of looking over her shoulder, of never staying in one place long enough to form attachments. 2 years of running from a crime she hadn't committed, but for which she would hang if caught. Tomorrow, she would have dinner with a man who intrigued her more than anyone she'd met in her travels. A man who seemed honorable and kind, the sort who would be duty-bound to turn her in if he knew the truth. A man she had no business getting close to. One dinner, she whispered to herself. Just one dinner, and then I'll keep my distance. But even as she made the promise, Maggie feared it was one she wouldn't be able to keep. The Columbia Hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Telluride, which wasn't saying much by Denver or San Francisco standards. But the tablecloths were clean, the silverware polished, and the food several steps above typical frontier fare. Maggie wore her best dress, a deep green that highlighted the auburn undertones in her chestnut hair. Ty rose when she entered, and Maggie was struck again by his height and the breadth of his shoulders. He dressed for the occasion in a proper suit that, while not fashionable by Eastern standards, fit him well and emphasized his athletic build. His hair was neatly combed, though a rebellious lock had already fallen across his forehead. "You look beautiful," he said simply as he held her chair. "Thank you, you're quite handsome yourself." The words slipped out before she could censor them. He smiled, clearly pleased but not smug about the compliment. "I clean up decent enough when the occasion calls for it." Over dinner, surprisingly good steaks with potatoes and early autumn vegetables, Ty told her more about his ranch and the challenges of raising cattle in the high country. The winters are hard, but the summer grazing can't be beat, he explained. The cattle thrive on the mountain grasses, and the isolation means fewer problems with rustlers than the ranches on the open plains. It sounds like a good life, Maggie observed, demanding but rewarding. It is. He studied her across the table. What about you? What brought you to teaching? Maggie chose her words carefully. I've always loved learning. My father was a professor before the war, literature and classics. He believed education should be available to everyone, not just the privileged. This much was true, though she omitted that her father had been forced to resign his university position after expressing such radical views in pre-war Louisiana. And your family, are they still in? He left the question hanging. They're gone, she said softly. The war and then the fever that came after. This too was true, though simplified. Ty nodded, understanding in his eyes. I lost my parents young as well, raised mostly by my grandfather in Missouri. Is he still living? No, he passed before I came west. Ty's expression grew distant. He was a good man, tough but fair, taught me everything worth knowing: how to work hard, treat people right, and stand by my word. He sounds wonderful, Maggie said sincerely. He was. Ty refocused on her. So you've been teaching since? Since I was 18. 6 years now, in various places. She sipped her water, avoiding his gaze. I like experiencing different parts of the country. Hence your warning about not staying in one place too long, Ty observed. Most schools prefer teachers who will commit to more than a term or two. I usually manage a year, Maggie said defensively. Circumstances just tend to arise. What kind of circumstances? She set down her fork. Mr. Grayson, Ty, he reminded her gently. Ty. I appreciate your kindness these past 2 days, but there are aspects of my life I prefer to keep private. Instead of being offended, he nodded. Fair enough. We all have parts of our past we'd rather not discuss over dinner. The simple acceptance in his tone caught her off guard. You're not going to press for details. Would it change who you are today if I knew every step of your journey? He asked. You're clearly educated, kind to those you meet, and passionate about teaching. That tells me more about your character than knowing where you taught last year or why you left. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by guilt. He deserved better than half-truths and omissions. I should warn you that I have a secret past, she said quietly, the words emerging before she could reconsider. Tyler Grayson's blue eyes held her steadily. I'm only interested in our future, Maggie. The simple statement hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Our future, as if such a thing were possible. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. I know exactly what I'm saying. His hand moved across the table to cover hers. I'm not a man given to flights of fancy or rash judgments. I've seen enough in my 32 years to know when someone is running from something versus running toward something better. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. Whatever ghosts chase you, they don't define who you are now. Maggie withdrew her hand, heart racing. You're making assumptions based on very little information. Perhaps, his gaze never wavered, or perhaps I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself not so long ago. The rest of dinner passed in lighter conversation, with Ty telling stories of ranch mishaps that had Maggie laughing despite her resolve to maintain emotional distance. By the time he walked her back to the Wyoming hotel, the tension had eased between them. I'm heading back to the ranch tomorrow, he said as they stood on the hotel porch. But I'll be in town for the harvest dance in 2 weeks, the Saturday before school starts. The whole town attends. Would you consider saving me a dance? Maggie knew she should refuse. 2 weeks would give her time to rebuild her defenses, to remember why entanglements were dangerous. Instead, she heard herself say, I'd like that. The pleasure that lit his face made her heart turn over in her chest. Then I'll look forward to it. He took her hand and, in a gesture that belonged to an earlier, more genteel time, brushed his lips across her knuckles. Good night, Maggie Vale. She watched him stride away down the darkening street, his tall figure eventually disappearing around a corner. Only then did she realize she was trembling. You're a fool, Maggie Vale, she whispered to herself. A complete and utter fool. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Maggie prepared for the school term. She moved from the hotel to a small but tidy cottage owned by the widow Mrs. Fletcher, who was delighted to rent to the new schoolteacher. The arrangement gave Maggie more privacy than the hotel while providing Mrs. Fletcher with both income and occasional company. Maggie spent her days at the schoolhouse, organizing supplies, reviewing the available textbooks, and creating lesson plans for students of varying ages and abilities. The work absorbed her, as teaching always had, providing temporary respite from her constant vigilance. She made a few cautious friendships with Hannah Sullivan, the baker's wife who supplied bread to most of Telluride's households, with Dr. Marcus Webb, the town physician who offered to provide health lessons to the older students once a month, with Reverend Abernathy and his wife, who invited her to Sunday services and the ladies' sewing circle that followed. But even as she established herself in the community, Maggie remained watchful. She read every newspaper that came to town, scanning for any mention of the old case. She varied her routine, never walking the same path at the same time 2 days in a row. And she kept the derringer loaded and accessible at all times. As the harvest dance approached, Maggie found herself both anticipating and dreading seeing Tyler Grayson again. Their dinner had left her unsettled, awakening possibilities she'd long since forced herself to abandon. A future. The very concept seemed foreign after so long focused solely on survival. The evening of the dance arrived clear and cool, with the aspens in the surrounding mountains turning gold against the evergreens. Maggie dressed with particular care in a gown of deep blue silk, one of the few fine items she'd kept from her previous life. The bodice was modestly cut but highlighted her small waist, while the skirt fell in elegant folds that swished pleasingly when she moved. Mrs. Fletcher observed her preparations with knowing eyes. "You look lovely, dear. Someone special attending tonight. Just community duty," Maggie demurred, pinning a small cameo at her throat. Hum. The older woman smiled. Would that community duty happen to be about 6'2" with shoulders like an ox and the bluest eyes this side of the Mississippi? Maggie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mr. Grayson has been kind in helping me settle in, nothing more, of course, dear." Mrs. Fletcher patted her arm. "Though I will say Tyler Grayson is one of the few men in these parts worthy of a woman like you. Built his ranch from nothing, treats his workers fair, and never causes trouble in town like some of the miners. A steady man." "I'm not looking for any man, steady or otherwise," Maggie insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The town hall had been transformed for the occasion with bunting, lanterns, and bouquets of late wildflowers and golden aspen branches. A 4-piece band played lively tunes at one end of the room, while tables laden with food and drink lined the other. Nearly everyone in Telluride seemed to be present, from miners still with dirt under their fingernails to the bank president in his Eastern suit. Maggie had just accepted a cup of punch from Hannah Sullivan when she felt a presence behind her. Even before she turned, she knew who it was. Something about the quality of the air seemed to change when he was near. "Good evening, Miss Vale," Ty said, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool evening. She turned, and her carefully prepared greeting died on her lips. He was devastating in a dark suit, white shirt, and string tie, his hair freshly cut and his face cleanly shaved. The weeks of ranch work had burnished his skin to a deeper tan, making his eyes seem even bluer by contrast. "Mr. Grayson," she finally managed, "you look well." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "As do you, more than well, in fact." He glanced at the dancers circling the floor. "I believe you promised me a dance. Did I? I recall only saying I'd consider it." But she was already setting aside her punch cup. "And have you finished considering?" He offered his hand. In answer, she placed her gloved fingers in his. One dance. One dance became 2, and then 3 as the evening progressed. Ty proved to be an excellent dancer, moving with a grace that belied his size. In his arms, Maggie felt simultaneously safer than she had in years and more endangered than ever, not by external threats, but by the growing warmth in her own heart. During a break in the music, they stepped outside to cool off in the crisp night air. Stars blanketed the sky above the mountains, so bright and numerous that Maggie caught her breath at the sight. "It never fails to humble me," Ty said softly, following her gaze upward. "Makes a man's troubles seem small by comparison, or a woman's," Maggie added. He turned to study her profile in the light spilling from the town hall windows. "Have you been happy here these past 2 weeks, Maggie?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. "I've been content. The town has been welcoming, and the preparations for school have kept me busy." "That's not quite what I asked," she met his eyes. "Happiness is a luxury I haven't allowed myself to consider for some time." "Why?" The simple question demanded honesty. Maggie looked away. "Because it requires a certain freedom that I don't possess." "What holds you captive?" When she didn't answer, he continued gently, "Is it something you've done or something done to you?" "Both," she whispered. "Neither. It's complicated. Life generally is." He moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Maggie, whatever burden you carry, whatever secret haunts you, it doesn't have to define your future. You can't know that. I know that I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about you," he said quietly. "About your smile, your intelligence, the way you light up when you talk about teaching. I know that I want to know you better, all of you, past and present." Maggie shook her head. "You say that now, but I say it because I mean it." His hand came up to gently turn her face toward his. "I'm not a man who speaks without consideration, Maggie. When I say I'm interested in our future, I mean exactly that." "There can't be in our future," she insisted, even as her body betrayed her by leaning toward him. "Why not?" "Because," she stopped, unable to continue without revealing too much. Ty's thumb brushed her cheek. "Whatever you're running from, Maggie Vale, I promise you this, I'm a patient man and a persistent one. I'll wait until you're ready to share your burdens, and when you do, we'll face them together." Before she could respond, the door to the town hall opened, spilling light and music into the night. Reverend Abernathy's voice called out, "Ah, there you are, Miss Vale. The children are asking for you to judge the apple bobbing contest." The moment shattered, Maggie stepped back from Ty, composing herself. "Of course, Reverend, I'll be right there." As she moved to follow the minister inside, Ty caught her hand. "Think about what I said, Maggie, please." She nodded once, then hurried inside, heart pounding and mind in turmoil. The school term began with 24 students ranging from shy 6-year-old Emily Collins to gangly 16-year-old James Whitaker, who made it clear he was only attending because his father insisted he finish his education before joining him full-time in their mining claim. Maggie threw herself into teaching with the dedication that had always been her refuge in times of emotional turmoil. She established routines, assessed each child's abilities, and created a curriculum that challenged the advanced students while supporting those who struggled. By the end of the first week, even James was grudgingly participating in literature discussions. True to his word, Ty didn't pressure her after the dance. He came to town every Saturday for supplies, and he always found a reason to stop by the schoolhouse or her cottage for brief, friendly conversations. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a jar of honey from his ranch's beehives, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, fresh apples from his small orchard. Never anything lavish enough to cause gossip, but each gift showed thoughtful consideration of her tastes and needs. September gave way to October, and the aspen trees blazed gold before dropping their leaves. The first snow dusted the highest peaks, a warning of the winter to come. Maggie settled deeper into life in Telluride, finding herself less jumpy, less vigilant as weeks passed without any sign that her past had followed her. Then came the telegram that shattered her fragile peace. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. Maggie had just dismissed her students and was cleaning the blackboard when Tommy Jenkins, the mercantile owner's son, burst into the schoolhouse. "Miss Vale, Pa sent me to fetch you. There's a telegram come for you, and Pa says it seems important." Maggie's hand froze on the blackboard. In 2 months in Telluride, she'd received no correspondence of any kind. No one knew where she was. She'd made certain of that. "Did your father say who sent it?" she asked, striving to keep her voice steady. No, madam, just that it came from Denver and marked urgent. Maggie's mind raced. Denver could mean the school board, but it could also mean someone had traced her there and was closing in. She forced a smile. Thank you, Tommy. Tell your father I'll be right along. As soon as the boy left, Maggie went to her desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. The derringer was where she'd left it. She slipped it into her pocket before heading to the mercantile, her heart pounding so hard she feared others might hear it. Ralph Jenkins looked up as she entered his store. Ah, Miss Vale, got an urgent wire for you. He handed her the envelope. Hope it's not bad news. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. She took the telegram with fingers that threatened to tremble. Would you excuse me? I'd like to read this privately. Of course, of course. He gestured to the small office at the back of the store. Take your time. Inside the cramped office, Maggie tore open the envelope and unfolded the telegram. Information received. Stop Emmett Blackwood released New Orleans prison October 12. Stop reportedly heading west seeking revenge. Stop exercise extreme caution. Stop. Will send further details when available. Stop. Harrison. Maggie sank into the chair behind the desk, legs suddenly unable to support her. Harrison, her father's old friend, and the only person who knew the full truth of what had happened that night in Louisiana. The only person who knew where she was. Emmett Blackwood, her former employer's brother, the man who had actually murdered plantation owner Charles Blackwood in a dispute over gambling debts and inheritance. The man who had tried to frame her for the crime when she witnessed the killing. The man who had sworn to find her and silence her permanently. She'd thought he was safely imprisoned for another decade at least, convicted of lesser crimes when the evidence against him for the murder had been deemed insufficient. But now he was free and hunting her. Maggie pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting waves of nausea and terror. She'd have to run again. Tonight, if possible. Pack only what she could carry and take the morning stage to Montrose, then the train west. Perhaps California this time, or even north to Canada. The thought of leaving Telluride, leaving her students, the friends she'd cautiously made, leaving Ty sent a physical pain through her chest. For the first time in 2 years, she'd found a place that felt like it could become home. For the first time since fleeing Louisiana, she'd allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than mere survival. Miss Vale, Ralph Jenkins's concerned voice came through the door. Are you all right? Maggie hastily folded the telegram and tucked it into her pocket. Yes, Mr. Jenkins, thank you for your concern, just unexpected news. She left the mercantile in a daze, her mind already planning her escape even as her heart rebelled against the necessity. She needed to speak with Mrs. Fletcher, make some excuse about a family emergency. She would need to withdraw her savings from the bank before it closed. She should leave a note for the school board explaining her sudden departure. Lost in these frantic thoughts, Maggie didn't notice the tall figure approaching until he spoke her name. Maggie, what's wrong? She looked up to find Ty standing before her, concern etched on his face. He'd clearly just ridden in from the ranch, dust coated his clothes, and his horse was tethered nearby. Nothing, she said automatically, just a minor issue with. She trailed off, unable to fabricate a convincing lie while looking into his worried blue eyes. He studied her pale face. You're shaking. Was she? Maggie looked down at her hands and saw they were indeed trembling visibly. She clenched them into fists. I'm fine, truly. Just a bit of a chill in the air. Ty glanced at the clear October sky and back to her. Maggie, don't, his voice gentled. Whatever's frightened you, let me help. For one wild moment, Maggie considered telling him everything about Charles Blackwood's murder, about Emmett's threats, about the 2 years she'd spent running from town to town. The urge to share her burden with someone with him was almost overwhelming, but she couldn't. Tyler Grayson was an honorable man who believed in justice and the law. How could she expect him to harbor someone wanted for questioning in a murder, even if she was innocent? And involving him would only put him in danger when Emmett arrived. I appreciate your concern, she said stiffly, but this is a private matter. Hurt flashed across his face, quickly masked. As you wish, he stepped back. But my offer stands, Maggie. Whatever trouble you're in, you don't have to face it alone. She nearly broke then, nearly threw herself into the safety of his arms. Instead, she forced herself to nod politely and continue walking toward her cottage. That night, Maggie packed her few valuable possessions into a carpetbag, the derringer, her savings, a change of clothes, the cameo that had been her mother's, and the small volume of Tennyson's poems that Ty had given her. Everything else she would have to leave behind. She wrote 3 letters by lamplight, one to the school board explaining that a family emergency required her immediate departure, one to Mrs. Fletcher thanking her for her kindness, and one to Ty. This last letter was the hardest, and she crumpled several drafts before settling on simple honesty, or as much honesty as she dared offer. Dear Tyler, by the time you read this, I will be gone from Telluride. Please know that leaving is not my choice but my necessity. The past I have tried to outrun has found me again, and I cannot risk bringing danger to this town or its people. You were right when you sensed I was running from something. What you could not know is that it is something that cannot be resolved through conventional means of justice. I am not what rumors might eventually claim me to be, but I cannot stay to defend myself. These past months have been the happiest I've known in years, in large part due to your kindness and friendship. In another life, I would have gladly explored where that friendship might lead. Please believe that, at least, do not try to find me. It would only bring you trouble that you do not deserve. With deepest regret and affection, Maggie. She sealed the letter, addressing it to him at the Silver Creek Ranch, and placed it with the others to be delivered after her departure. Then she lay down fully clothed on her bed, setting an alarm clock to wake her in time for the early morning stagecoach. Sleep proved elusive, with every creak and rustling leaf outside her window jolting her to alertness. Finally, near dawn, exhaustion claimed her for a brief, restless slumber. The pounding on her door jerked her awake. Maggie sat up, disoriented, reaching automatically for the derringer on her nightstand. Gray light filtered through the curtains. Dawn had barely broken. Maggie, Ty's voice urgent and unmistakable. Maggie, open the door. Her heart leaped to her throat. How had he known she was planning to leave? Had Mrs. Fletcher seen her packing and sent for him? The pounding continued. Maggie, please, it's important. She moved to the door, derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. What is it? She called through the wood. Open the door, Maggie, you're in danger. A chill ran through her. What do you mean? There's no time to explain through a door, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Please, Maggie, trust me, trust, such a simple word for such an impossible request, and yet, this was Ty. Whatever else happened, she knew instinctively he wouldn't hurt her. She unlocked the door and opened it a few inches, keeping the derringer hidden but ready. Ty stood on her porch, his expression grim. Behind him, his horse was lathered with sweat, evidence of a hard, fast ride. Pack whatever you need, he said without preamble. You're coming with me to the ranch. I don't understand. There's a man in town asking questions about you, Ty said. Arrived on the late stage yesterday. Southern accent, expensive clothes, carries a walking stick with a silver handle. He's claiming to be a Pinkerton detective with a warrant for questioning a fugitive matching your description. Emmett. He'd found her faster than she'd anticipated. Maggie's knees threatened to buckle. How did you hear about this? My ranch hand Manuel was in town overnight. Overheard the man at the hotel making inquiries. Manuel rode out to the ranch first thing to warn me. Ty's eyes dropped to where her hand clutched the derringer half hidden in her skirt. Are you planning to shoot me, Maggie? She flushed, tucking the small gun into her pocket. Old habits. I wasn't expecting visitors at dawn. Just how much danger are you in? He asked quietly. Enough that I was planning to leave on this morning's stage, she admitted. Something flickered in his eyes, relief perhaps that she hadn't already gone. Well, that won't work now. He's staying at the hotel, which means he'll see everyone boarding the stage. His jaw set determinedly. But my ranch is 10 miles south in the opposite direction from the stage road. He won't think to look for you there, at least not immediately. Ty, I can't involve you in this. If he's claiming to be a Pinkerton, is he? Ty interrupted. Is he actually a detective? No, Maggie shook her head. He's the brother of my former employer in Louisiana. He's a dangerous man, Ty. Then you definitely can't face him alone. Ty glanced over his shoulder at the lightening sky. We're wasting time, Maggie. Pack what you need. You can tell me everything once we're safely at the ranch. She hesitated only a moment longer. Give me 5 minutes. True to her word, Maggie was ready in 5 minutes, her carpet bag in hand. Ty took it from her and secured it to his saddle, then helped her mount before swinging up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a secure circle that felt more like protection than entrapment. Hold tight, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. We'll take the back way out of town. They rode in silence through the early morning, following game trails and cattle paths rather than the main road. The sun rose fully as they climbed into the foothills, casting long shadows across meadows frosted with the night's cold. In other circumstances, Maggie might have found the scenery breathtaking. Now she was conscious only of the warmth of Ty's chest against her back and the growing distance between them and Telluride between them and Emmett Blackwood. After about an hour, the trail opened into a broad, sheltered valley cradled between mountain ridges. A creek ran through it, glinting silver in the morning light. Near the creek stood a large, 2-story log house, not a crude cabin, but a proper home with glass windows, a covered porch, and a stone chimney from which smoke curled lazily into the clear air. Several outbuildings and corrals completed the picture, with cattle grazing on the hillsides beyond. Silver Creek Ranch, Ty said, a note of pride in his voice despite the tense circumstances. It's beautiful, Maggie said sincerely, and it was the kind of place she might have dreamed of in another life, one free from shadows and fear. Ty guided the horse to the house, where a lean, weathered man with a magnificent mustache was already approaching from one of the outbuildings. Everything quiet, Miguel? Ty asked as he dismounted, then reached up to help Maggie down. She, patron, no one has come this way. The man's dark eyes took in Maggie with undisguised curiosity. This is the schoolteacher, Miss Vale. This is Miguel Sandoval, my foreman and the finest horseman in Colorado territory. Ty kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture both protective and reassuring. Miguel, please have one of the boys take care of Diablo. He's had a hard ride. Of course, Miguel nodded to Maggie. Welcome to Silver Creek, señorita. As Miguel led the horse away, Ty guided Maggie up the steps and into the house. The interior was surprisingly refined for a bachelor rancher's home, sturdy furniture arranged comfortably around a large stone fireplace, braided rugs on the polished wood floors, oil lamps with clear glass chimneys. And books, just as Ralph Jenkins had mentioned, shelves of books lined one entire wall. It's not what I expected, Maggie admitted, taking in the civilized surroundings. What did you expect? Cow skulls and bearskin rugs? Ty's smile was tight but genuine as he took her carpet bag and set it aside. I like comfort as much as the next man, more coffee, less whiskey than most, perhaps. He led her to a chair near the fire and then moved to stoke the flames higher, driving away the morning chill. When he turned back to her, his expression had grown serious again. Now, Maggie Vale, if that's truly your name, I think it's time you told me exactly who you're running from and why. He settled into the chair opposite hers. The truth, all of it. Maggie looked into his steady blue eyes and made her decision. My real name is Margaret Valois, she began. I was born and raised in New Orleans. The story poured out of her how her father, once a respected professor at the University of Louisiana, had been forced to resign when his abolitionist views became known in the years before the war. How her parents had died of yellow fever when she was 18, leaving her destitute. How she had taken a position as governess to the daughter of Charles Blackwood, a wealthy plantation owner outside New Orleans. It was a good position, she explained, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mr. Blackwood was stern but fair, and his daughter Charlotte was a bright, eager student. His brother Emmett, however, she swallowed hard. Emmett visited often. He was charming in company, but there was a coldness to him that frightened me. He made advances that I rebuffed. He didn't take rejection well. Ty's expression darkened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. 2 years ago, I was returning to the house late after taking some books to the overseer's children. I heard shouting from Mr. Blackwood's study. The window was open and I could see inside. Emmett and Charles were arguing violently about money, gambling debts, and Emmett's share of the family business. Emmett was drunk, enraged. Maggie closed her eyes briefly. He picked up a paperweight from the desk and struck his brother with it. Again and again until Charles stopped moving. She looked up to find Ty watching her intently, his face grave but not judgmental. I must have made some sound because Emmett looked up and saw me at the window. I ran. I knew the plantation better than he did all the hiding places, the paths through the cane fields. I made it to the town and to my father's old friend, a lawyer named Harrison. The one who sent you the telegram, Ty guessed. Maggie nodded. Harrison helped me escape that night. By morning, Emmett had reported his brother's murder and accused me of the crime, claiming I had been stealing from the household and Charles had caught me. He said I'd fled with valuables from the house. But there was no evidence against you. None except Emmett's word, which carried weight as a Blackwood. The stolen items were never found, of course, because they never existed, but the case remained open. Harrison told me later that without a body to examine, Emmett had the body buried quickly, claiming distress, and with only circumstantial evidence, the authorities couldn't build a strong case against either of us. So they settled for charging Emmett with lesser crimes. The telegram mentioned he'd been in prison, fraud and embezzlement. He'd been stealing from the family business for years, apparently. Maggie sighed. Harrison thought he would serve at least 10 years. I never imagined he'd be released so soon, and you've been running ever since that night. Ty's voice held a mixture of admiration and sadness. Yes, never staying in one place long enough for rumors to catch up, teaching where I could, taking other work when necessary. She looked down at her hands. Until Telluride, I thought I might be safe here at least for a while. The isolation, the distance from Louisiana, I allowed myself to hope. Her voice broke slightly. I allowed myself to care. Ty rose from his chair and knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his large, warm ones. Maggie Margaret, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. I believe you, he said simply, 3 words, yet they nearly undid her. You do? Yes. His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands. Every instinct I have tells me you're speaking the truth, and I've learned to trust those instincts. His mouth quirked in a half smile. Besides, you don't strike me as the murdering type. A strangled laugh escaped her. No, stubborn, brave, and too independent for your own good, perhaps, but not a killer. His expression grew serious again. This Emmett Blackwood, though he sounds like a dangerous man. He is, Maggie confirmed, and he won't stop until he finds me. As the only witness to his crime, I'm a threat as long as I'm alive. Then we need a plan. Ty released her hands and rose. One that doesn't involve you running alone anymore. Ty, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. His voice was firm. Running hasn't worked, Maggie. 2 years of looking over your shoulder and he still found you. There has to be another way. She shook her head. The law won't help. It's my word against his, and the Blackwood name still carries weight in Louisiana, even after the war. Then we fight outside the law. Ty paced before the fire, thinking, if Emmett is posing as a Pinkerton, he's already breaking the law. We can use that. How? I'm not sure yet. But 2 minds are better than one, and I have friends in this territory who owe me favors. He stopped pacing and turned to her. Will you trust me, Maggie? Will you let me help you end this once and for all? Maggie looked up at him, this man who had ridden out before dawn to warn her, who had brought her to his home for protection, who believed her story without hesitation. This man who looked at her with eyes that promised safety and something far more dangerous to her heart. Yes, she whispered. I'll trust you. The relief on his face was palpable. Good, first you need rest. You look exhausted. He gestured to a staircase that led to the 2nd floor. There's a bedroom at the top of the stairs that you can use. My sister stays there when she visits from Denver. Your sister. Maggie hadn't known he had family. Rebecca, she's married to a banker in Denver. A flicker of humor crossed his face. She'd be scandalized to know I have an unmarried woman staying in her room, but she's also the first person who'd tell me to help you. She sounds wonderful. She is. Stubborn as a mule and twice as opinionated but loyal to a fault. He picked up Maggie's carpetbag. "Come, you should rest while I speak with Miguel. We need to prepare in case Emmett tracks you here." Maggie followed him upstairs to a pleasant bedroom with a brass bed, a dresser, and curtained windows that overlooked the valley. Ty set her bag on a chair and moved to the door. "Lock this behind me," he instructed. "There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed if you're cold. I'll have Maria, Miguel's wife, who keeps house for me, bring up some food later." "Thank you, Ty, for everything." He paused in the doorway, his expression softening. "Get some rest, Maggie, you're safe here." Then he was gone, closing the door behind him. Maggie turned the key in the lock, then sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't facing her demons alone. The knowledge brought tears to her eyes, tears she finally allowed herself to shed as she curled up on the bed and gave in to the sleep she so desperately needed. She awoke to late afternoon light slanting through the curtains and the smell of cooking drifting up from below. For a disorienting moment, Maggie couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back: the telegram, Ty's warning, the ride to the ranch, and her confession. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Miss Vale," a woman's voice gently accented, "I have brought you some food and fresh water." Maggie rose quickly, smoothing her rumpled clothes and hair before unlocking the door. A plump, middle-aged Mexican woman stood outside with a tray. "Senor Grayson said you needed rest, but also that you must eat." The woman smiled warmly. "I am Maria Sandoval, Miguel's wife." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sandoval. Please come in." Maggie stood aside to let the woman enter. "And thank you for the food." "De nada." Maria set the tray on a small table by the window. "I have brought chicken soup, fresh bread, and tea, simple but good for strength." She studied Maggie with kind, shrewd eyes. "You have had a difficult time, yes?" Maggie hesitated, unsure how much Ty had told his staff. "Do not worry," Maria continued. "Senor Grayson has explained only that you are in trouble not of your making and that a bad man pursues you." She made a dismissive gesture. "It is enough for us to know this ranch has sheltered others in need before." "It has?" Maggie asked, surprised. Senor Grayson believes in second chances. He himself came west seeking one. No." The older woman patted Maggie's hand. "Eat, regain your strength. There is a dress in the wardrobe that might fit you. It belonged to Senora Rebecca before she married, and hot water for washing whenever you wish it." "Mrs. Sandoval," Maggie called as the woman turned to leave. "Is Mr. Grayson here?" "He has gone to speak with Sheriff Parker in Carlton, the next town over from Telluride. He said to tell you he will return by nightfall and explain then." After Maria left, Maggie ate the simple but delicious meal, then used the provided hot water to wash away the dust and fear of the morning. The dress in the wardrobe, a practical day dress of soft blue cotton, fit well enough, though Rebecca Grayson had evidently been a few inches taller. Feeling somewhat restored, Maggie ventured downstairs. The main floor was empty, though a fire crackled welcomingly in the hearth. She wandered to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines: Shakespeare, Dickens, Thoreau, Emerson, volumes of history and philosophy, books on animal husbandry and agriculture, even a collection of Greek myths. The eclectic library revealed more about Tyler Grayson than he perhaps realized. "He reads every night before bed." Maria's voice came from the doorway to what Maggie presumed was the kitchen. "Sometimes by lamplight until the oil runs low. His grandfather taught him that education is never wasted, even for a rancher." "It's an impressive collection," Maggie said, turning from the shelves, "especially out here." "Senor Grayson is an impressive man," Maria smiled. "Would you like coffee? He will return soon." As if summoned by her words, the sound of hoofbeats approached the house. Moments later, the front door opened and Ty strode in, removing his hat as he entered. His eyes found Maggie immediately, and something in his expression relaxed. "You're up. Good." He hung his hat on a peg by the door. "I was hoping to speak with you before dinner." "I'll bring coffee," Maria said, disappearing into the kitchen. Ty crossed to where Maggie stood by the bookshelf. "Rebecca's dress suits you," he observed. "Mrs. Sandoval was kind enough to offer it. I hope your sister won't mind." She left it here 3 years ago and hasn't asked for it since. I think it's officially yours now." He gestured to the chairs by the fire. "Please sit. We have matters to discuss." Maria returned with coffee, which she poured for them both before tactfully withdrawing. Ty added a splash of whiskey to his cup from a decanter on a side table, raising an eyebrow in silent question to Maggie. When she nodded, he added a measure to hers as well. "I've spoken with Sheriff Parker in Carlton," he began, settling into his chair. "Will Parker is a good man and an honest lawman. He served with me briefly during the war." "What did you tell him?" Maggie asked, anxious enough. "That a man posing as a Pinkerton detective is making false accusations against the Telluride schoolteacher, and that you've taken refuge at my ranch because you fear for your safety." Ty sipped his coffee. "I didn't share the details of your past. Those are yours to tell or keep private as you choose." "And what did Sheriff Parker say?" "He'll make inquiries about this supposed detective. Real Pinkertons carry specific identification, and their activities are generally coordinated with local law enforcement. If Emmett Blackwood is impersonating a Pinkerton, he's committed a federal offense." Hope flickered in Maggie's chest. That would mean the law could help after all, potentially. But Will cautions that proving the impersonation might be difficult if Blackwood has done his homework. Ty leaned forward, his expression intent. "Maggie, I think we need to consider a more direct approach." "What do you mean?" "I mean confronting Blackwood on our terms, not his, drawing him out in a way that exposes his true intentions." Maggie's stomach clenched with fear. "That sounds dangerous." "It would be," Ty acknowledged, "but less dangerous than waiting for him to find you here, which he eventually will. Telluride is a small community. People talk. Someone will mention that the schoolteacher and the rancher from Silver Creek seem particularly friendly." "You have a specific plan in mind," Maggie guessed, the beginnings of one. Ty set down his cup. "First, we need to understand exactly what Blackwood wants. Is he truly here to silence you as a witness, or does he have other motivations?" "What other motivations could he have?" "Revenge for the time he served, perhaps, or maybe there's more to the situation with his brother's estate than you know." Ty's gaze was thoughtful. "Did Charles Blackwood have a will? Would you have been mentioned in it?" Maggie stared at him, a new possibility dawning. "Charlotte, his daughter. She was fond of me. Charles once mentioned that he had provided for my continued employment in his will to ensure Charlotte's education wouldn't be disrupted if anything happened to him." She shook her head. "But surely that wouldn't be enough to pursue me across the country." "Perhaps not on its own, but combined with your ability to testify that Emmett murdered his brother, it might be." Ty rose and began to pace, thinking aloud. If Charlotte was her father's heir and Emmett became her guardian after Charles's death, he would control her inheritance until she came of age, Maggie finished, understanding blooming. "And if I were to return and tell what I saw, his control of those assets might be questioned, especially if there were already suspicions about his handling of the family business." Ty nodded. "It makes sense. This isn't just about silencing a witness, it's about protecting his access to his niece's fortune." "Charlotte would be 17 now," Maggie said softly, "almost of age to inherit, which makes the timing of Emmett's prison release and his pursuit of you more than coincidental." Ty stopped pacing. "We need more information, and for that I think we need Harrison's help." "I have no way to contact him directly," Maggie said. "The telegram came through general delivery." "But he knows you're in Telluride," Ty pointed out. "Could you send a wire asking for specific details about Charlotte's situation and Emmett's legal status regarding the estate?" "Yes, but if Emmett is watching the telegraph office, we'll send it from Carlton, not Telluride." Ty's expression was determined. "Miguel can ride there first thing tomorrow. And in the meantime, you stay here where it's safe. I have 6 ranch hands, all loyal men who know how to use a rifle. Blackwood won't take you from Silver Creek without a fight." His voice hardened on the last words, and Maggie saw a flash of the steel beneath his gentle exterior. "I've brought nothing but trouble to your door," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for that." Ty crossed to her chair and knelt before her, taking her hands as he had earlier. "Maggie, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I'm not sorry," he said firmly. "Not for a single moment since you stepped off that stagecoach in Telluride. You should be," she whispered. "Your life was peaceful before I came. Peaceful, yes, but incomplete." His hands tightened around hers. "I told you once that I'm interested in our future, not your past. That hasn't changed. Even now, knowing everything, especially now." His blue eyes held hers, unwavering. "I admire your courage, Maggie, your resilience, your determination to build a life despite everything that's happened. Those qualities don't change because I know the circumstances that forged them." Tears pricked behind her eyes. "Ty," one of his hands released hers to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not asking for promises, Maggie, not now when your life is in turmoil. I'm only asking that you let me stand beside you through this. Let me help you find a way forward that doesn't involve running anymore." The tenderness in his touch, the sincerity in his words, broke something open inside her, a door she'd kept locked for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Before she could reconsider, Maggie leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Ty froze for a heartbeat, clearly surprised, then responded with a gentleness that made her heart ache. His hand cradled her cheek as if she were something precious, his lips moving against hers with restrained passion. When they finally parted, his breathing was unsteady and his eyes had darkened to the color of a summer storm. "I've wanted to do that since the harvest dance," he admitted, his voice rough. "I've wanted you to," she confessed, "even when I knew I shouldn't." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "We'll figure this out, Maggie, together, I promise you that." For the first time in 2 years, Maggie allowed herself to believe it might be possible. The next morning, Miguel rode for Carlton with a carefully worded telegram for Harrison. Ty spent the day showing Maggie the ranch, a welcome distraction from the waiting and uncertainty. They rode along Silver Creek, visited the small apple orchard he'd mentioned, and checked on a new calf born the previous day. Throughout it all, Ty kept a rifle across his saddle and maintained a vigilant watch on the approaches to the ranch house. That evening, after a dinner prepared by Maria, they sat before the fire with cups of coffee, discussing possible scenarios and strategies. The easy companionship between them had deepened since their kiss, though both tacitly agreed to focus on the immediate danger before exploring what might lie beyond it. "If Harrison confirms our suspicions about Charlotte's inheritance," Ty said, "we might be able to use that to draw Blackwood into the open." "How?" Maggie asked. "By offering him what he wants or what he thinks he wants." Ty's expression was thoughtful. "A written statement from you, perhaps, denying that you witnessed the murder." "But that would be a lie," Maggie protested. "Of course." Ty smiled grimly. "The point isn't to actually give him such a statement, but to make him believe you might under the right circumstances." A trap, she realized, exactly, one sprung in the presence of Sheriff Parker and witnesses. It's risky, Emmett is clever, and he's had years to plan this. "So have you," Ty pointed out, "and now you have allies." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted their planning. Ty was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, moving to the window. Maggie's heart pounded as she watched him peer cautiously through the curtains. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's Miguel," he said, setting the rifle aside. "Earlier than I expected." They met the foreman at the door. Miguel dismounted wearily, his expression grave. "Patron, I have news, some good, some not so good." Inside, Miguel handed over a telegram from Harrison, which Maggie read aloud. "Suspicions correct. Stop Charlotte comes of age next month. Stop Blackwood legal guardian but estate in trust. Stop will stipulates Valois continued employment. And small bequest. Stop Blackwood attempted access trust funds repeatedly. Stop lawyers blocked efforts. Stop no official warrant for questioning issued. Stop exercise extreme caution. Stop Harrison. So we were right," Ty said. "He's after control of Charlotte's inheritance, and your testimony could ruin that." "What's the bad news, Miguel?" Maggie asked, noting the foreman's continued tension. "Blackwood was in Carlton today, asking questions about Silver Creek Ranch and Senor Grayson." Miguel's dark eyes were troubled. "He learns fast, Patron. He already knows the senorita is here," Ty swore softly. "How?" The livery boy in Telluride remembered you taking her up behind you on your horse yesterday morning. Blackwood offered him $5 for the information. Miguel shook his head. The boy didn't mean harm, he didn't know the situation. Of course not, Ty said, though his jaw was tight. Did you speak with Sheriff Parker? He confirms no official communications from Pinkerton Agency about any investigation in this area. He says this is enough to question Blackwood but not to arrest him. Miguel hesitated. There is more. Sheriff Parker said a man matching Blackwood's description purchased a horse and supplies in Carlton this afternoon. He was asking about the best route to Silver Creek. The implication was clear. Emmett Blackwood was coming, and soon. How many men do we have at the ranch tonight? Ty asked his foreman. 5, counting myself, all armed. Post watches at all approaches to the house. 2-hour rotations through the night. I want to know the moment anyone comes within sight of the ranch. Ty's voice was calm but authoritative. It will be done. Miguel nodded respectfully to Maggie before departing to organize the watch. When they were alone, Maggie turned to Ty, her face pale but resolute. He's forcing our hand. We can't wait to set a trap now. No, Ty agreed, but we still have advantages. This is our territory, not his. He's a city man unused to the mountains, and he doesn't know that we know he's coming. What will we do? We'll prepare to receive him, Ty said grimly, but not as he expects. Through the night, they planned. Maggie told Ty everything she could remember about Emmett Blackwood, his temperament, his habits, his weaknesses. Ty sketched a rough map of the ranch, marking defensible positions and possible approaches. They drafted a statement for Maggie to sign, carefully worded to seem like a recantation while actually admitting nothing that could later be used against her. Near dawn, Miguel reported movement on the north ridge, a single rider, moving carefully but steadily toward the ranch. They had perhaps an hour before he arrived. Are you ready? Ty asked Maggie as they stood in the first light of day. She nodded, fear evident in her eyes but determination stronger. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, let me do most of the talking. Stay behind me, out of his direct line of sight or fire. He touched her cheek gently. I won't let him hurt you, Maggie, I swear it. I know. She covered his hand with hers. Be careful, Ty. Emmett is dangerous when cornered. So am I. There was no boast in his voice, only calm certainty. They took their positions, Ty on the front porch, rifle in hand but held casually. Maggie just inside the doorway, partially hidden but able to see and hear. Miguel and 2 other ranch hands positioned strategically around the house, out of sight but within firing range. The rider appeared at the edge of the clearing, silhouetted against the rising sun. He approached slowly, deliberately, his caution betraying his awareness that he might be riding into a trap. As he drew closer, Maggie could make out his features, the same cold eyes, the same thin-lipped smile that had haunted her nightmares for 2 years. Emmett Blackwood reined in his horse about 20 yards from the porch, just out of comfortable rifle range. He was dressed like a gentleman traveler, but the bulge under his coat betrayed the presence of a sidearm. Tyler Grayson, he called, his New Orleans accent pronounced against the backdrop of the Colorado mountains. That's right, Ty answered evenly, and you would be Emmett Blackwood. Surprise flickered across Blackwood's face, quickly masked. I see my reputation precedes me, such as it is. Ty's tone was neutral, but his stance remained alert, ready. What brings you to Silver Creek, Mr. Blackwood? I believe you're harboring a fugitive, Mr. Grayson. A woman wanted for questioning in a murder case. Blackwood's cold eyes scanned the porch and windows of the house. I've been authorized to bring her back to Louisiana. Have you? That's interesting, considering Sheriff Parker in Carlton has no record of any official warrant or Pinkerton authorization. Ty shifted his rifle slightly, not raising it, but ensuring Blackwood noted its presence. In fact, impersonating a law officer is a serious crime in Colorado territory. Blackwood's smile tightened. A misunderstanding, I assure you. I never claimed to be a law officer, merely someone with an interest in seeing justice done. Justice for whom, Mr. Blackwood? Your brother or your pocketbook? The direct hit landed visibly. Blackwood's face hardened. I don't know what lies Margaret Valois has told you, but she witnessed my brother's murder and fled rather than testify. Those are the facts. Are they, or did she flee because the actual murderer was framing her? Ty's voice remained calm, conversational almost, but his eyes never left Blackwood. A murderer who stood to gain control of his niece's inheritance if the only witness disappeared. Preposterous, Blackwood snapped, but his right hand twitched toward his coat. Charlotte comes of age next month, Ty continued relentlessly. The trust becomes hers to control. No more access for Uncle Emmett, who's already tried repeatedly to misappropriate funds, according to the family lawyers. Blackwood's face flushed with anger. You know nothing about family matters, I know enough. Ty nodded toward the house behind him. Miss Valois has prepared a statement, a full account of what she witnessed the night your brother died. It's being sent to Charlotte, to the family lawyers, and to the authorities in New Orleans. Even if something happens to Miss Valois now, your plans are finished. For a moment, Blackwood seemed at a loss. Then his expression changed, a calculating look replacing the anger. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement, Mr. Grayson. There's no need for this matter to become more complicated than it already is. What kind of arrangement? Ty asked, sounding mildly interested. Money, of course. A substantial sum for both you and Miss Valois in exchange for the original statement and her agreement to disappear permanently. Blackwood's confidence was returning. Say $5,000 each. A fortune in these parts, I imagine. An interesting offer, Ty admitted, but there's a problem with it, Mr. Blackwood. And what's that? I don't believe you have access to $10,000, not without Charlotte's trust, which you're about to lose. Ty's voice hardened. And more importantly, I don't make deals with murderers. Blackwood's face contorted with rage. His hand plunged inside his coat and emerged with a revolver. You fool, do you think the crack of a rifle shot split the morning air? Blackwood jerked in the saddle, his revolver flying from his hand as blood bloomed on his right shoulder. His horse reared in panic, nearly unseating him. That was Miguel from the barn, Ty said conversationally, raising his own rifle now. He was a sharpshooter in the Mexican army before coming north. The next shot will be considerably more lethal, Mr. Blackwood. Maggie stepped onto the porch then, her own derringer pointed steadily at the man who had haunted her for 2 years. It's over, Emmett. The running, the threats, all of it ends today. Blackwood glared at her, his left hand clutching his wounded shoulder. You think this changes anything? You have no proof. It's still your word against mine, perhaps, Ty acknowledged. But there's now documented evidence of your attempt to bribe and threaten us, witnessed by my ranch hands. There's your impersonation of a Pinkerton agent, and there's the fact that you just drew a weapon on private property after being warned to leave. He nodded toward the ridge behind Blackwood. And Sheriff Parker has witnessed it all. Blackwood twisted in his saddle to see Will Parker and 2 deputies emerging from the trees, rifles trained on him. You set me up, Blackwood snarled. You set yourself up, Emmett, Maggie replied, her voice stronger than she felt. You always were too convinced of your own cleverness. Sheriff Parker approached, his weathered face grim. Emmett Blackwood, you're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, impersonating a law officer, and attempted murder. As the deputies disarmed and bound Blackwood, then led him away, Maggie felt her knees weaken. The derringer slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. Ty was at her side instantly, one strong arm around her waist. It's over, he murmured against her hair. It's really over. Maggie turned into his embrace, tears of relief streaming down her face. I can't believe it, after so long. Sheriff Parker approached them, hat in hand. Miss Valois, we'll need your formal statement about all of this, including the original murder you witnessed. I've already telegraphed the authorities in New Orleans. With Blackwood's actions here today and your testimony, they're reopening the case. What will happen to him? She asked. He'll stand trial here first for the crimes committed in my jurisdiction. After that, Louisiana may extradite him for the murder charge. Parker shook his head. Either way, he won't be troubling you again. Multiple witnesses saw him draw on an unarmed woman. In these parts, that alone could hang him. After the sheriff departed, promising to return the next day for their formal statements, Maggie and Ty stood together on the porch, watching the sun climb higher over the peaceful valley. His arm remained around her waist, and she leaned into his strength, suddenly exhausted but lighter than she'd felt in years. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ty turned her to face him, his eyes serious. "That depends on you, Maggie. You're free now, truly free. You can go anywhere, do anything. And if I want to stay," the question hung between them, fragile and weighted with meaning, "then you'd make me the happiest man in Colorado territory." His hands framed her face gently. "I meant what I said, Maggie. I'm interested in our future. I have been since I first saw you step off that stage, coach. Even knowing my past, your past made you who you are, the woman I've fallen in love with." The words were simple, direct, like the man himself. "I don't care what name you use or what shadows you carry. I only care about who you are now and who we might become together." Tears welled in Maggie's eyes again, but these were different tears of joy, of possibility. "I've been running so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place." Ty smiled, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I could help with that. Silver Creek has a way of growing on a person." "So does its owner," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. This time their kiss held no hesitation, no restraint, only promise and passion and the certainty of shared tomorrows. When they finally parted, breathless, Ty rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes, Maggie Vale, or should I call you Margaret Valois now?" She smiled up at him, her heart fuller than she'd believed possible. "Maggie Vale is who I am now. Margaret Valois belongs to the past." Her hands rested on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "And yes, Tyler Grayson, that's a yes, to staying, to us, to whatever future we build together." His answering smile was like the sunrise breaking over the mountains, radiant with joy and the promise of a new day, a new beginning. "Then welcome home, Maggie," he said softly. "Welcome home." 6 months later, wildflowers carpeted the meadows around Silver Creek Ranch, their vibrant colors matching the ribbons that decorated the ranch house and barn. Chairs had been arranged in neat rows before an arch of aspen branches, and guests from Telluride, Carlton, and as far away as Denver gathered to witness the union of Tyler Grayson and Maggie Vale. The events of that October morning had indeed marked the end of Maggie's long ordeal. Emmett Blackwood had been convicted of assault and attempted murder in Carlton, sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. Before he could be extradited to Louisiana, however, new evidence had emerged in his brother's murder, a deathbed confession from a household servant who had helped Emmett dispose of the murder weapon. With this testimony corroborating Maggie's account, New Orleans authorities had filed formal murder charges. Charlotte Blackwood, now of age and in control of her inheritance, had written to Maggie, expressing gratitude for her courage and inviting her to return to New Orleans as a welcome guest, not a fugitive. While touched, Maggie had politely declined. Her future lay in Colorado now, with Ty and the life they were building together. The school board had been understanding about her temporary absence, welcoming her back to the schoolhouse once the danger passed. For the remainder of the school year, Maggie had split her time between teaching in Telluride and helping Ty expand Silver Creek's operations. With her encouragement, he had purchased additional land and begun breeding horses as well as cattle, utilizing Miguel's expertise. As spring turned the valley green again, Ty had formally proposed, offering not a diamond ring but a deed adding Maggie's name to the Silver Creek property as co-owner and partner. "This land represents our future," he'd told her. "I want it to be ours, truly and legally together." She had accepted with tears and laughter, marveling at how completely her life had transformed in less than a year. Now, standing before friends and neighbors with Reverend Abernathy officiating, Maggie wore not white but a gown of pale blue silk that matched the Colorado sky. At 33, Ty was handsome and dignified in a new suit from Denver, his blue eyes never leaving her face as they exchanged vows. "I, Tyler James Grayson, take you, Margaret Elizabeth Vale, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly to the assembled guests. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When it was her turn, Maggie's voice was steady and sure. I, Margaret Elizabeth Vale, take you, Tyler James Grayson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. The simple gold bands they exchanged symbolized not just their marriage, but the unbroken circle of trust and honesty they had built between them, a foundation stronger than any secret or shadow from the past. By the authority vested in me, Reverend Abernathy proclaimed, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. He smiled warmly at the couple. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Grayson. Ty needed no further invitation. Drawing Maggie into his arms, he kissed her with a tenderness and passion that spoke volumes of his love and commitment. The assembled guests erupted in cheers and applause, none more enthusiastic than Miguel and Maria Sandoval, who had become like family to Maggie during her months at Silver Creek. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing in the decorated barn, a feast prepared by women from both Telluride and Carlton, and enough goodwill to warm the cool spring night. As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the festivities, creating pools of golden light where friends gathered to toast the couple and wish them well. Near midnight, Ty found Maggie standing alone on the porch of the ranch house, gazing up at the star-filled sky. He slipped his arms around her waist from behind, and she leaned back against his solid strength. Happy, Mrs. Grayson, he murmured against her ear. More than I ever imagined possible, she answered truthfully, turning in his embrace to face him. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find this has all been a dream, that I'm still running, still alone. Not a dream. He brushed a tendril of hair from her face. And never alone, not ever again. I love you, Tyler Grayson, she said simply. For believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, for seeing a future when all I could see was the past. I love you, Maggie Grayson, he replied, the new name rolling naturally from his tongue. For your courage, your strength, and for choosing to share your life with me. They kissed under the vast canopy of stars, two people who had found in each other not just love, but home, the end of one journey and the beginning of another, far richer one. 5 years later, Silver Creek Ranch had prospered beyond even Ty's ambitious plans. The cattle operation had expanded, and their horses bred for intelligence and endurance were sought after throughout the territory. The original ranch house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family, with a dedicated library filled with books for all ages. Maggie had continued teaching until the birth of their first child, James Charles Grayson, 3 years earlier. Their daughter, Elizabeth Marie, had followed 18 months later, completing their family. Though she no longer taught formally, Maggie had established a small school on the ranch for the children of their workers and neighboring ranchers too distant from town for regular attendance. Ty had become a respected voice in territorial politics, advocating for fair water rights and land use policies that balanced development with conservation. His thoughtful approach and reputation for integrity had led to offers of political appointments, which he consistently declined, preferring to remain at Silver Creek with his family. The shadows that had once haunted Maggie had faded. Emmett Blackwood had died in prison the previous winter, taking the last of her fears to the grave with him. Charlotte had married well and maintained a correspondence with Maggie, sending gifts for the children and occasional invitations to visit New Orleans, invitations that Maggie had finally accepted for the following spring. On a warm summer evening, with the children asleep upstairs and the day's work complete, Ty and Maggie sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm secure around her waist, the easy, comfortable closeness of a couple whose love had deepened through shared joys and challenges. Any regrets? Ty asked, his fingers idly playing with a strand of her hair. About what? About staying. About choosing this life instead of returning to Louisiana or seeking adventure elsewhere. Maggie smiled, knowing he asked not out of insecurity but genuine interest in her happiness. Not a single one, she answered truthfully. Silver Creek is more home to me than any place I've ever known. Because of the beautiful mountains and clear streams, he teased. Because of the handsome rancher who promised me a future when I couldn't see past my fears, she corrected, tilting her face up to his. You were right, you know. That night at dinner when you said you were only interested in our future, not my past. I usually am right, he said with mock seriousness. It's one of my more endearing qualities. Maggie laughed and poked his ribs gently, along with your humility clearly. His expression softened as he gazed down at her. I meant every word that night, Maggie, I still do. Each day with you and our children is better than the last. Whatever happened before we met helped shape us into the people who found each other. I wouldn't change any of it. Nor would I, she agreed, nestling closer to him as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The past brought us together, but it's the future, our future, that matters most. As night settled over Silver Creek Ranch, Ty and Maggie Grayson remained on their porch, wrapped in each other's arms and the peaceful certainty of belonging to people who had found in each other not just love, but redemption, purpose, and the courage to build a life worthy of their dreams. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the valley. Somewhere nearby, an owl hooted softly. The gentle rhythm of the porch swing marked the moments, passing moments of a shared life, rich with promise and possibility, stretching into a future bright with hope and love. And for Maggie, who had once measured her life in miles traveled and dangers escaped, there was only this. Home and family, and the steady heartbeat of the man beside her, the man who had seen beyond her secrets to the woman she truly was, the woman she had always hoped to be.